Hi, boys and girls, and welcome back to another episode of our Read Aloud series for the book The BFG by Roald Dahl. I am so happy to have you with us today as we continue reading our story and keep finding out what's going to go next in our book. So far, we've learned about Sophie and the BFG, and they've gone on some crazy adventures together, catching dreams. And last time we were together, we learned about some of those dreams. So today, we're going to continue trying to figure out what they're going to do next, because as we left off, the giants are now going off for the night to eat little English children. And Sophie was not okay with that. She wants to find a way to stop them. So the next chapter that we're starting with today is called The Great Plan. So hopefully with this chapter, we'll find out what her plan is. What is she going to do next? So I'm going to jump right in and get started, and I'm excited to find out what's our next section of our book. "We've absolutely got to stop them," Sophie cried. "Put me back in your pocket quick, and we'll chase after them and warn everyone in England that they're coming." "Redonkulous and impossible," the BFG said. "This is going 2 times as fast as me, and they's is finishing their guzzle before we's is even halfway." "But we can't just sit here and do nothing," Sophie cried. "But how many boys and girls are they going to eat tonight?" "Many," the BFG said. "The flesh lump-eating giant alone has a most squawkling, whoppy appetite." "Will he snatch them out of their beds while they're sleeping?" "Like peas out of a pottle," the BFG said. "I can't bear to think of it," Sophie cried. "Then don't," the BFG said. "For years and years I is sitting here on this very rock every night after when they is galloping away, and I's is feeling so sad for all the human beings they's is going to gobble up. But I's has had to get used to it. There is nothing I can do. If I wasn't a titchy little runty giant only 24 feet high, then I would be stopping them. But that is absolutely out of the window." "Do you always know where they're going?" Sophie asked. "Always," the BFG said. "Every night they's is yelling at me as to where they're boodling past. The other day they's was yelling we's off to Mississippi and Missouri to guzzle them both." "Disgusting," Sophie said. "I hate them." She and the big friendly giant sat quietly side by side on the blue rock in gathering dusts. Sophie had never felt so helpless in her life. After a while, she stood up and cried out, "I can't stand it. Just think of those poor girls and boys who are going to be eaten alive in just a few hours. We can't just sit here and do nothing. We've got to go after those brutes." "No," the BFG said. "We must," Sophie cried. "Why don't you go?" The BFG sighed and shook his head firmly. "I's has told you 5 or 6 times. All the third will be the last, and I's is never showing myself to human beings." "Why ever not?" "If I do, they will be putting me in the zoo with all the jiggy raffs and the catty piddlers." "Nonsense," Sophie said. "And they will be sending you straight back to the orphanage," the BFG went on. "Grown-up human beings is not famous for their kindness. They's is all squiffle rotters and grink sludgers." "That simply isn't true," Sophie cried angrily. "Some of them are very kind indeed." "Who?" the BFG said. "Name one." "The Queen of England," Sophie said. "You can't call her a squiffle rotter or a grink sludger." "Well," the BFG said. "You can't call her a squick peep, not much either," Sophie said, getting angrier and angrier. "The flesh lump eater is longing dearly to guzzle her up," the BFG said, smiling a little now. "Who, the Queen?" Sophie cried aghast. "Yeah," the BFG answered. "Flesh lump eater says he has never eaten a queen, and he thinks perhaps she has an especially scrumdiddlyumptious flavor." "How dare he?" Sophie cried. But Flesh Lump Eater says there's too many soldiers around her palace that he doesn't try it. He'd better not, Sophie said. He is also saying he would very much like to guzzle one of the soldiers in his pretty red suit, but he's worried about those big black furry hats they's is wearing. He thinks they might be sticking in his throat. I hope he chokes, Sophie said. Flesh Lump Eater is a very careful giant, the BFG said, and Sophie was silent for a few moments. Then, suddenly, in a voice filled with excitement, she cried out, I've got it! By golly, I think I've got it! Got what? Asked the BFG. The answer! Cried Sophie. We'll go to the Queen. It's a terrific idea. If I went and I told the Queen about these disgusting man-eating giants, I'm sure she'd do something about it. The BFG looked down at her sadly and shook his head. She is never believing you, he said. Never in a month of Mondays. I think she would. Never, the BFG said. It is sounding such a wonky, tall story. The Queen will be laughing and saying, what awful rub squash. She would not. Of course she would, said the BFG. Oz has told you before that human beings is simply not believing in giants. That's up to us to find a way of making her believe, Sophie said. And how is you getting in to see the Queen anyways? The BFG asked. Now hold a second, Sophie said. Just you hold a second, because I've got another idea. Your ideas is full of crodswoggle, the BFG said. Not this one, Sophie said. You say that if we tell the Queen, she would never believe us. Oz is certain she wouldn't, the BFG said. But we aren't going to tell her, Sophie said excitedly. We don't have to tell her. We'll make her dream it. That is an even more froth-bungling suggestion, the BFG said. Dreams is a lot of fun, but nobody's is believing in dreams any either. Yous is only believing in a dream while Yous is actually dreaming it. But as soon as Yous is waking up, Yous is saying, oh, thank goodness it was only a dream. Don't you worry about that part of it, Sophie said. I can fix that. Never can you fix it, the BFG said. I can, I swear I can. But first of all, let me ask you a very important question. And here it is. Can you make a person dream absolutely anything in the world? Anything you like, the BFG said proudly. If I said I wanted to dream that I was in a flying bathtub with silver wings, could you make me dream it? I could, said the BFG. But how? Sophie said. You obviously don't have exactly that dream in your collection. I do not, the BFG said, but I could soon be mixing it up. How could you mix it up? It is a little bit like mixing a cake, the BFG said. If Yous is putting the right amounts of the different things into it, Yous is making a cake come out any way you want. Sugary, spongy, curranty, Christmassy, or grobble switchy. It's the same with dreams. Go on, Sophie said. I has a dillions of dreams on my shelf, right or left? Right, Sophie said. Ice has dreams about bathtubs, lots of them. Ice has dreams about silver wings. Ice has dreams about flying. So all Ice has to do is mix those dreams together in the proper way. And Ice is very quickly making a dream where Yous is flying in a bathtub with silver wings. I see what you mean, Sophie said, but I didn't know you could mix one dream with another. Dreams like being mixed, the BFG answered. These is getting very lonesome all by themselves in those glassy bottles. Right, Sophie said. Now then, do you have dreams about the Queen of England? Lots of them, the BFG said. And about giants? Of course, the BFG said. Swiggles of them. And about giants eating people? Yep, definitely, the BFG said. And about little girls like me? Those are the commonest of all, the BFG said. Ice has bottles and bottles of dreams about little girls. And you could mix them all up just as I want you to? Sophie asked, getting more and more excited. Of course, the BFG said. But how is this helping us? I think Hughes is barking up the wrong dog. Now hold on, Sophie said. Listen carefully. I want you to mix a dream which you will blow into the Queen of England's bedroom when she is asleep. And this is how it will go. Now hang on a minute, the BFG said. How is I possibly going to get near enough to the Queen of England's bedroom to blow in my dream? Hughes is talking dumb silly. I'll tell you later, Sophie said. For the moment, please listen carefully. Here is the dream I want you to mix. Are you paying attention? Very close, the BFG said. I want the queen to dream that 9 disgusting giants, each one about 50 feet tall, the most disgusting giants, are galloping through England at night. She must dream their names as well. What are their names again? Flesh lump eater, the BFG said. Man hugger, bone cruncher, child chewer, meat dripper, gizzard gulper, maid smasher, blood bottler, and the butcher boy. Let her dream all those names, Sophie said, and let her dream that they will be creeping into England in the depths of the witching hour and snatching little boys and girls from their beds. Let her dream that they will be reaching into the bedroom windows and pulling little boys and girls out of their beds, and then... Sophie paused. Do they eat them on the spot, or do they carry them away first? She asked. They's usually just popping them straight into their mouths like popcorn, the BFG said. Put that in the dream, Sophie said. And then the dream must say that when their tummies are full, they will go galloping back to giant country where no one can find them. Is that all? The BFG said. Certainly not, Sophie said. You must then explain to the queen in her dream that there is a big friendly giant who can tell her where all those beasts are living so that she can send her soldiers and armies to capture them once and for all. And now let her dream one last and very important thing. Let her dream that there is a little girl called Sophie sitting in her windowsill who will tell her where the big friendly giant is hiding. Where is he hiding? Asked the BFG. We'll get to that later, Sophie said. So the queen dreams her dream, right? Right, the BFG said. And then she wakes up and the first thing she thinks is, oh my, what a horrid dream. I'm so glad that was only a dream. And then she looks up from her pillow and what does she see? What does she see? Asked the BFG. She sees a little girl called Sophie sitting on her windowsill right there in real life before her eyes. How is you going to be sitting in the queen's windowsill, may I beg of you? The BFG asked. You are going to put me there, Sophie said. And that's the lovely part about it. If somebody dreams that there is a little girl sitting on her windowsill, and then she wakes up, and the little girl is sitting on her windowsill, then the dream has come true, is it not? I is beginning to see where Hughes is driving to, the BFG said. If the queen is knowing that part of her dream is true, then perhaps she is believing in the rest is true as well. That's about it, Sophie said, but I shall have to convince her that of myself. You said Hughes is wanting the dream to say there is a big friendly giant who is also going to talk to the queen. Absolutely, Sophie said. You must. You are the only one who can tell her where to find the other giants. And how's is I meeting the queen? Asked the BFG. I's is not wanting to be shooted by her soldiers. The soldiers are only at the front of the palace, Sophie said. At the back there is a huge garden and there are no soldiers at all. There is a very high wall with spikes on it and a garden to stop people from climbing in. But you could simply walk over that. How's is you knowing all about this queen's palace? The BFG asked. Last year, I was in a different orphanage, Sophie said. It was in London, and we used to go for walks all around there. Is you helping me to find this palace? The BFG asked. I has never dared go to hide and sneaking around London in my life. I'll show you the way, Sophie said confidently. I's is frightened of London, the BFG said. Don't be, Sophie said. It's full of tiny dark streets, and there are very few people about in the witching hour. The BFG picked Sophie up with between one finger and his thumb and placed her gently in the palm of the other hand. Is the queen's palace very big, he asked. Huge, Sophie said. Then how's is we finding the right bedroom? Now that's up to you, Sophie said. You're supposed to be an expert at that sort of thing. And Yous is absolutely sure that the queen will not put me in a zoo with all the caterpillars. Of course she won't, Sophie said. You'll be a hero, and you'll never have to eat snozcumbers again. Sophie saw the BFG's eyes widen, and he licked his lips. You mean it, he said. You really mean it? No more disgusting snozcumbers? You couldn't get one if you wanted to, Sophie said. Humans don't grow them. That did it. The BFG got to his feet. When is you wanting me to fix this special dream? He asked. Now, Sophie said, at once. When is we going to see the queen? He said. Tonight, Sophie said, as soon as you've mixed the dream. Tonight? The BFG cried. Why such a flush-bunking hurry? If we can't save tonight's children, we can anyway save tomorrow, Sophie said. What's more, I'm getting famished. I haven't eaten a thing for 24 hours. Then we says better get cracklin', the BFG said, moving back towards the cave. Sophie kissed him on the tip of his thumb. I knew you'd do it, she said. Come on, let's hurry. And that is the end of the chapter for the Great Plan. So we are going to do one more chapter today. It is called Mixing the Dream. It was dark now. The night had already begun. The BFG, with Sophie sitting on his hand, hurried into the cave and put on those brilliant, blinding lights that had seemed to come from nowhere. He placed Sophie on the table. Stay here, please, he said, and no chittering. Eyes is needing to listen only to silence when Eyes is mixing up such a naughty, plexicated dream as this. He hurried away from her. He got out an enormous empty glass jar that was the size of a washing machine. He clutched it to his chest and hurried towards the shelves on which stood the thousands and thousands of smaller jars containing the captured dreams. Dreams about giants, he muttered to himself as he searched the labels. Giants guzzling human beings. No, not that one, not that one. Here's one, and here's another. He grabbed the jars and unscrewed the tops. He tipped the dreams into the enormous jar that he was clutching, and as each one went in, Sophie caught a glimpse of the small sea-green blob tumbling from one jar into another. The BFG hurried towards another shelf. Now, he muttered. Eyes is wanting dreams about giggle houses for girls, about boggle boxes for boys. He was becoming very tense now. Sophie could almost see the excitement bubbling inside of him as he scurried back and forth among his beloved jars. There must have been 50,000 dreams altogether up there on those shelves, but he seemed to know almost exactly where each one of them was. Dreams about little girls, he muttered, and dreams about me, about the BFG. Come on, come on, come on, hurry up, get on with it. Now where in the wonky world is I keeping those? And so it went on. In about a half an hour, the BFG had found all the dreams he wanted and had tipped them into one huge jar. He put the jar on the table. Sophie sat watching him but said nothing. Inside the big jar, lying on the bottom of it, she could clearly see about 50 of those oval sea-green jellyish shapes, all pulsing gently in and out, and some lying on top of each other, but still a quite separate individual dream. And now Weeza's mixing them, the BFG announced. He went into the cupboard where he kept his bottles of frobscottle, and from out it he took a gigantic egg beater. It was one of those that had a handle in which you turn, and down below there is lots of overlapping blades that go whizzing around. He inserted the bottom end of this contraption into the big jar where the dreams were lying. Watch, he said, and he started turning the handle very fast. Flashes of the green and blue exploded in the jar, and the dreams were being whisked into a sea green froth. Poor things, Sophie cried. Oh, these is not feeling it, the BFG said as he turned the handle. Dreams is not like human beings or animals. These has no brains. These is made of zosimus. After about a minute, the BFG stopped whisking. The whole bottle was now full to the brim with large bubbles. They were almost exactly like the bubbles we ourselves blow from soapy water, except that these had even brighter and more beautiful colors swimming on their surfaces. Keep watching, the BFG said. Quite slowly, the topmost bubble rose up through the neck of the jar and floated away. A second one followed, and then a third and a fourth, and soon the cave was filled with hundreds of beautifully colored bubbles, all drifting gently through the air. It was truly a wonderful sight. As Sophie watched them, they all started floating towards the cave entrance, which was still open. They're going out, Sophie whispered. Of course, the BFG said. Where to? Those is all the little tiny dream bits that I isn't using, the BFG said. And these is going back to the misty country to join up with the proper dreams. It's all a bit beyond me, Sophie said. Dreams is full of mystery and magic, the BFG said. Do not try to understand them. Look in the big bottle and you will now see the dream uses wanting for the queen. Sophie turned and stared at the great jar. On the bottom of it there was something thrashing around wildly, bouncing up and down and flinging itself against the walls of the jar. Good heavens, she cried, is that it? That's it, the BFG said proudly. But it's horrible, Sophie cried. It's jumping about. It wants to get out. That's because it's a trogglehumper, the BFG said. It's a nightmare. Oh, but I don't want you to give the queen a nightmare, Sophie cried. If she's just dreaming about giants guzzling up boys and girls, then you's expecting it to be and accept a nightmare, the BFG said. Oh no, cried Sophie. Oh yes, the BFG said. A dream where you's seeing little chidlers being eaten is about the most frightsome troggle-hopping dream you can get. It's a kicksy boggle thumper. It's a whoopsie grob switcher. It's all of them riddled into one. It is as bad as that dream I blew into the flesh lump eater this afternoon. You know what? It's worse. Sophie sat down at the fearful nightmare dream that was still thrashing away at the huge glass jar. It was much larger than the others. It was about the size and shape of, shall we say, a turkey's leg? It was jellyish. There had tinges of bright scarlet deep inside. There was something terrible about the way that it was throwing itself against the sides of the jar. I don't want to give the queen a nightmare, Sophie said. I's is thinking, the BFG said, that your queen will be happy to have a nightmare if having a nightmare is going to save a lot of human beings from being gobbled up by filsome giants. Is I right or is I left? I suppose you're right, Sophie said. It's got to be done. And she will soon be getting over it, the BFG said. Have you put all the other important things into it, Sophie asked. When Isis blow in that dream into the queen's bedroom, the BFG said, she will be dreaming every single thing-a-ling that Yous asked me to make her dream. About me sitting in the windowsill? Now that part is very strong. About the big friendly giant? Isis putting in a nice goblet about him, the BFG said. As he spoke, he picked up one of his smaller jars and very quickly tipped the struggling, thrashing trogglehumper out of the large jar and into a smaller one. Then he screwed the lid on tightly of the small jar. That's it, he announced. Wheeze is now ready. He fetched his suitcase and put the small jar into it. Why bother taking such a big suitcase when you've got only one jar? Sophie asked. You could put the jar in your pocket. The BFG looked down at her and smiled. By goggles, he said, taking the jar out of his suitcase. Your head is not quite full of grime sludge after all. I can see yous is not born last week. Thank you, kind sir, Sophie said, making a little curtsy from the tabletop. Is you ready to leave? The BFG asked. I'm ready, Sophie cried. Her heart was beginning to thump and at the thought of what they were about to do. It was really a wild and crazy thing, and perhaps they would be thrown in prison. The BFG was putting on his great black cloak. He tucked the jar into the pocket of his cloak. He picked up his long, trumpet-like dream blower, and then he turned and looked at Sophie, who was still on the tabletop. The dream bottle is in my pocket, he said. Is you going to sit in there with it during the travel? Never, cried Sophie. I refuse to sit next to that beastly thing. Then where is you going to sit? The BFG asked her. Sophie looked over for a few moments. Then she said, if you would be kind enough to swivel one of your lovely big ears so that it's laying flat like a dish, that would make a very cozy place for me to sit. By gumbo, that is a squackling good idea, the BFG said. And slowly he swiveled his huge right ear until it was like a giant shell facing the heavens. He lifted Sophie up and placed her onto it. The ear itself, which was about the size of a large tea tray, was full of the same channels and crinkles as a human ear. It was extremely comfortable. I hope I don't fall down your ear hole, Sophie said, edging away from the large hole just beside her. Be very careful not to do that, the BFG said. You would be giving me a cronkling earache. The nice thing about being there was she could whisper directly into his ear. This is tickling me a bit, the BFG said. Please do not jiggle about. I'll try not to, Sophie said. Are we ready? Ooh-wee, yelled the BFG. Don't do that. I didn't do anything, Sophie said. Yous is talking too loud. Yous is forgetting that I's is hearing every little thing-a-ling 50 times louder than usual, and there you is shouting away right inside my ear. Oh gosh, Sophie murmured. I forgot that. Your voice is sounding like thunder and trumpets. I'm so sorry, Sophie whispered. Is that better? No, cried the BFG. It sounds as though yous is shooting off a blunderbuss. Then how can I talk to you? Sophie whispered. Don't, cried the poor BFG. Please don't. Each word is like you dropping buzz bombs in my ear hole. Sophie tried speaking right under her breath. Is this better? She said. She spoke so softly she couldn't even hear her own voice. That's better, the BFG said. Now I's is hearing you very nicely. Now what is it you was trying to say just now? I was saying, are we ready? We is off, cried the BFG, heading for the cave entrance. We's is off to meet Her Majesty the Queen. Outside the cave, he rolled up a large, round, black stone into place and set off at a tremendous gallop. And that is the end of the chapter, Mixing the Dream. So now that we've finished our reading section of the video, we're going to move on to your writing section of the video. Now, I have loved seeing your written responses so far. I think it's great that you're able to get your creative side going and respond to the book. I think it's absolutely amazing. So for your next writing assignment, I would like you to create your own dream. So just like the BFG did, mixing in all these different ideas together, if you could make your own dream, what would you want to mix together? Now, I know we've talked about dreams before, but for this assignment, I want you to think about a dream that you would want to make for yourself. So before we've talked about blowing dreams and if you could give a dream to somebody else, what would you do? But for this, I want you to think about what dream would you like for yourself? If you could make a dream and give it to yourself to have maybe the best night's sleep, what would your dream look like? So I look forward to seeing those writing responses. I hope you enjoyed listening to our book. I sure know I did. It's getting exciting. It's hard to put down. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I look forward to having you join us next time as we continue reading the BFG by Roald Dahl. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.